name is Tom Vasel, and welcome to the AlphaBest, a series of videos where I give you my 10 favorite games for each letter of the alphabet. Last time I talked about C, which was an amazing letter, but now we're going to go to the letter D, which stands for Dice Tower. Fantastic. These games got to be good. Let's see. Number 10, Dungeon Fighter. Now, Dungeon Fighter is a silly game. If you remember my C list, I talked about Catacombs, a flicking dungeon game. Dungeon Fighter is a throwing dice on the table game. You have to bounce dice onto a target, and where they land on a target is where you hit each creature. Now, this one is really silly. All right, the game is, I mean, you can like, oh, I have a new weapon and it will do extra damage, but I got to throw it behind my back, or I have to jump up in the air when I throw it, or some kind of weird thing, and it's really silly and fun. There's 4 expansions, Earth, Water, Air, and Fire, that add even more silliness and fun to it. It's not for everyone's taste, but it's one I love very much, and that is Dungeon Fighter. Number 9 is Defenders of the Realm. Defenders of the Realm is a cooperative game that when you first hear about it, you're like, well, that sounds a lot like Pandemic. It is like Pandemic, kind of. And then you add dice and you add generals. In Defenders of the Realm, there are 4 evil generals marching towards your fantasy city that you must protect. These generals are also spreading their troops throughout the land. Each general is very different. Each troop has a difference. You will be a different character, whether a barbarian or a eagle rider or a magician or whatever, and you're fighting and you're going out and you're clearing these troops out, and eventually you have to go and find each of these generals and fight them and defeat them. You need to defeat all 4. To win, one general gets to the middle, you lose. Too many troops on the board, you lose. Lots of ways to lose. The game is extremely thematic and extremely exciting each time I play it. I love fighting these generals. Lots going on there. That's Defenders of the Realm. Number 8 is a party game, Dixit. Dixit gets a lot of love from people because there's a lot of party games out there that do the apples to apples scenario, where everyone plays a card and the judge picks one. Dixit turns it on its head by people putting cards, and the judge doesn't know who played each card, and people are there's no judge really. Just one person's playing a card, and each person's trying to match them. It's very psychological. The cards have gorgeous but really weird artwork on them. And all sorts of interesting things can happen, and you can be very clever in this game, and yet at the same time have a amount of hilarious fun. There's like 5 versions of the game at this point, lots of expansions. Certainly check this one out, Dixit. Number 7 is a game that brings zombies, which is not something I'm a big fan of, but they brings them to a level that I thought was very enjoyable, and that's Dead of Winter. Dead of Winter is, think Walking Dead. The zombies are there, but they're kind of a backdrop. You're working with the other players. Each player has a secret agenda that they're trying to accomplish. There's a possibility one player is a traitor and trying to get the colony to mess up, or whatever their agenda is. It's not always the same thing. Players are trying to work together, but at the same time complete their own agendas and try to figure out who the traitor is so that person doesn't complete their agenda. All this with an amazing storytelling system in the game. The system of how random events happen in this game is really well done. Brings a lot of flavor to this series. That is Dead of Winter. Number 6 is Dungeon Twister, or Dungeon Twister 2. They're essentially the same game, just Dungeon Twister 2 had miniatures. I wish the first one did. Dungeon Twister, you have 8 characters, and you are fighting an opponent's 8 characters because some wizard threw you in a dungeon. Said fight each other. And you get a point if you can get to the opponent's end line, or if you take out one of their people. And the game is pure strategy. There's some random setup in this, but other than that, it's strategy. You're trying to outguess the other person with a combat system with card play, trying to maneuver, use special abilities. Each of the 8 characters has a special ability. And once you add in expansions, there's all different sorts of weird characters. It is a very unique, interesting game. They came out with a card game version a couple years ago, which distills the whole game down to a card game version, and it works, although I still think I like the board game a little bit better. But a really solid game, and very unique. I don't know any game like this one, Dungeon Twister. Number 5 from Mayfair Games and Klaus Teuber is Domain. Now he's known, of course, for Catan. Which, if you notice, didn't hit my C, but it's a great game. But Domain is just wow. This game is simple. You are slowly building little kingdoms on the board and increasing your domains and butting heads with your neighbors and constantly trying to cut into their domain. And it's very vicious back and forth with a very simple system. You play a card, pay the money to play that card, or you sell a card and get the money for selling that card. But when you sell a card, you're putting it out there for other people to buy and maybe use against you. Really great game, especially good with 4 players. Beautiful pieces, especially considering when it came out and that it came from Mayfair. But a solid game, one I'm glad to have in my collection. That's Domain. Number 4 is Dominion. Yes, the deck builder that started the deck building craze. The game that has a lot of expansions, and then they said they were done, and then they came out with an expansion last year. Now another one is about to come out, and I don't care because I just really like this game. Yes, the theme is barely there, but yes, this game is just straight up mechanisms, and it's interesting every time you bring out 10 sets of cards, and you're like, how are these cards going to work together to build a deck to beat my opponents this time? How can I efficiently put them together? And I like that. It's not wide-ranging strategy. It's just focusing on these 10 cards. What kind of cool combinations can I make this time as I play this game? And every game is going to be different because the combinations are going to be different. Great fun. Another highly recommended game from me. And then number 3, Descent, 2nd edition. Oh, I love Descent. When I first came, I was like, ooh, because Doom was the first game that came and you like took the characters from Doom, walked around and blew up aliens. Then Descent took the same thing and brought it to a fantasy level, and I was like, wow, the hero quest of my youth is now here. It's more exciting. It was fun. It was very long, though. They shortened it up a bit while also making it long in a campaign way. With one of the best expansions that ever came out. And then Descent 2 put all that in the same box. You can play these small modules where one person is a dungeon master, everyone's playing against them. It's not always just kill all the monsters. There's a huge variety. I mean, huge variety. So many different cool scenarios. You can play for a short time or for a really long time. A lot of cool things in this game. Descent 2nd edition. Number 2, Duel of Ages 2, which is just a kind of updated version of Duel of Ages. Duel of Ages is one of those games that I know not everyone likes as much as me, but I really enjoyed. I love the theme where you have a frontiersman mixing with a knight, mixing with Robin Hood, with a robot, mixing with an alien who can read minds, fighting against a guy from the Civil War, Napoleon, and another future, a fantasy dragon with another future alien. And you're all using weird weapons from flamethrowers to grenades to snow sleds, all sorts of things. And they're fighting each other and trying to accomplish different goals. And there's just so much craziness, but the theme is so amazingly cool. I love this game. It is not for everyone. I do like the fact that you set a time limit. You say, hey, we're going to play for 2 hours, and that's how long you play. But it is a lot of fun. That's Duel of Ages. Number 1 is Dice Masters. Were you expecting anything different? I do love Dice Masters. Whether it's Marvel Dice Masters, DC Dice Masters, D&D Dice Masters, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dice Masters, or even the upcoming Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Dice Masters, which I haven't played yet. But I think Dungeons & Dragons is my favorite mechanisms, but I love Marvel. I love that I can have Spider-Man and Superman on the same team fighting against, Batman and the Joker or whatever. There's all sorts of characters. It's easy, it's simple. It took a game I really enjoyed, Quarriors, and really streamlined that system, made it a little bit like Magic, but it really is kind of like Magic, but you get to roll dice. Yeah, such a neat thing, but a lot of good strategy. You think it's just luck, play someone who's good at it, and they will stomp all over you. But I love it, lots of fun. Dice Masters, my favorite game that starts with the letter D. Games that almost made the cut, The Duke, Dragon's Gold, Dice Town, the trick-taking game, David and Goliath. A lot of good games that start with the letter D. Well, folks, that's it for this time. Next time, we go to the letter E. Until then, I'm Tom Vasel, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.